support some of this shift. So today, naturally, we've brought together key people from the industry to help us understand what's happening on the ground, looking at Paul, how we can help, and what's out there to support the transition. Our fantastic lineup of guests will share their insights. So we have first up Chris Rimmer from Cenex, who will reflect on the levy fund activity and how it's helping local authorities accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. Then we'll hear from Lloyd Allen from Bristol City Leap, where one local authority is tackling the challenge head on and pushing forward the electrification strategy. And finally, Mike Cuts live at Millbrook with Paul Kirby from Iveco. Hi, Mike. Who will show us what's available in the heavy vehicle space or LCV space to meet these decarbonisation needs. Before we speak to them, let's have a chat with the EV Café team. How are we all? We all good?
Wonderful. Surrounded by vans.
What more could you want? What more could you want? Paul, I've got a question for you then. What do you think is the biggest hurdle for local authorities in supporting businesses to transition to electric vans? And what solutions do you see and not what's behind you?
Well, so I think for a long time, the biggest challenge was the vehicles themselves. So there wasn't so many vehicles, but now we have a really good selection, and we're going to come on to the selection of the vehicles later. But as the Levi Fund would suggest, we need support around power and infrastructure, because for commercial vehicles in particular, of course, we don't suit just maybe a standard AC charge point or the spaces that are available in the urban environment. And also the actual councils themselves are struggling to have power, enough power on their site to be able to, power DC chargers so that stuff can come in and go out. But there's some great examples of people overcoming barriers, and I'm sure we'll come on to that, because solar, battery storage, wind turbines, even potentially now that the legislation has changed, all to be able to provide power at the point that it's needed, so that vehicles like this with big batteries going a long distance, and even ability to take power off of the back of the vehicles, we'll discuss later, then you've got everything you need in order to be able to move forward. So, the biggest challenge, I think, is power and infrastructure for the local councils, because the vehicles are here now.
Yeah, go on, Sam.
I just wanted to add to that.
Got a point.
Well, I just think it's Paul is in a very glamorous setting at Millbrook today. I'm not. I'm in Swindon. But after this webinar, I've got a quarterly review meeting with the Electric Freightway, which is all about heavy goods electrification and the commercial charging, which Paul has just made reference to. So whilst my setting isn't as glamorous, this is the rest of my day is spent working on those that are putting the trucks on the ground and putting the infrastructure in the ground to support commercial charging. So that's great to see it, because you know how much I hate starting sentences with "we need." So I am doing, and we are doing the actual work of getting vehicles and infrastructure installed, which is really, really promising. So it's wonderful to be able to have these sort of meetings coming up where we're talking about the stuff that's going in the ground to support commercial charging for everybody, including, of course, local authorities.
Sam, on the topic of putting infrastructure in the ground, what can local authorities do to scale up charging infrastructure, particularly in urban environments? I know you're a big fan of lamppost charging, so is that?
Yeah, I think the best thing they can do is not do anything and actually collaborate with those on the peripherals of those areas whereby the infrastructure is best suited. Because what we don't need is lots of on-street charging provisions which won't cater for commercial charging. We don't need to try and put power in the middle of urban areas where it's incredibly expensive, hugely dense populated, and incredibly difficult from a health and safety perspective. The charging needs to be at the right place at the right time, and that needs probably, in many cases, not in your local authority, but in somewhere that supports a multiple of local authorities. So I think in the next few years, we'll see more hubs developing that are catered for this, that isn't necessarily directly on your footprint, but is accessible as and when you come out of a particular area. Because in my humble opinion, there's too much effort in trying to put the charging energy right on the doorstep of people where it's actually not necessarily the most relevant place in the future.
Do you think that, on that topic, do you think that local authorities should be more active in this market or just work with CPOs?
I think collaboration is a big word we've been using and everybody uses a long time. But I think in the local authority space, I don't know much about local authority, if I'm totally honest. But I think the collaboration element means that that's the bit that needs to be focused on, not just the CPOs, but the landowners in a multitude of areas. I think is really important to make sure that, again, right charges, right place, right time is the critical balance.
Just one quick point, Sam. You always advocate, charging when you're stopped, not stopping to charge. It sounds like the proposal that you're making there is that you make some deviation in your day to a separate place to charge and then go back about your business. But, isn't it about finding ways to get solar, renewable energy into local authorities like Matt Ralph has done at Nottingham, to be able to provide the energy when the vehicles are stopped without having to go to a separate place?
Well, I mean, your first point is a petrol station, so that's how that works right now. So it's a similar model that everyone already knows, where they go off somewhere to fill up and then continue their journey. And just because
it counts as your normal stand.
It does, but we're talking about commercial traffic here, Paul. This is commercial traffic, and the fact we need a methodology that's
more important.
Those vehicle types and where they go to fulfill their energy, and we've got to make sure we do it for the larger for mass. It needs to be en masse, not bits here or there. And the other thing is local generation is brilliant, but you don't need to have the local generation next to the vehicles all the time, and the charging it doesn't need to be that way all the time. Sometimes it works very harmoniously. But it doesn't need to be that way. You can do lots and lots of local generation and pump that into the grid. That doesn't mean that's where the chargers need to be. Sometimes it works, but not always. So,
Sam, we're going to need to move on a bit.
Yes,
because,
you asked me the questions.
This is a risk of being a Paul and Sam show for the next hour. So
True.
I wouldn't be the first. John, what other practical actions can local authorities take to ensure that they have the necessary infrastructure, but the necessary infrastructure to support large fleet operators?
I can only speak for Scotland with any real knowledge, and local authorities are very much leaving it to central government, so the Scottish government, to guide them in the right way. So I think there's a partnership which happens in Scotland between central government, local authorities and business, where we are nervous, if I'm honest, to pick up Sam's point. You're busy doing it. Scotland, very much, the local authorities are looking to central government, who have undertaken a huge amount of research into where the charging infrastructure actually needs to be. And a report came out 2 days ago from Heriot-Watt University, which has mapped the traffic flows across Scotland for EHGV, and is looking to match the inward investment from businesses along with government seed funding to deliver the right charging in the right place for HGV, so along the A9, A90, M74. And I think what will come in time is that local authorities will step forward as government steps back, but the business sector, CPOs, will be there throughout that journey supporting. And since I was at the Scottish Government, £100 million has been spent by the Scottish Government on charging infrastructure. And in the last year alone, £65 million has inwardly been invested by CPOs in new charging infrastructure. So there's a massive business support for this transition. And local authorities are almost having it done without their further intervention.
Thank you, John. And finally, Sarah, with all the growing public charge point operators, curbside charge point operators, private operators, domestic, and the growing variety of payment systems for charging, how could local authorities help streamline these kind of processes and make fleet electrification a bit more attractive?
This is a subject so close to my heart. Let's not forget the huge challenge that local authorities are up against in terms of satisfying every different facet of their residency. Gosh, so you've got to support business, you've got to support individuals, you've got to support everybody over the economic, social, demographic spectrum. You've also got a huge landowner. The local authority is a really prominent sort of tenant opportunity for a CPO, a private sector CPO, to work with. And what local authorities don't have is the ability to support that charging infrastructure once it's gone in the ground. They have to outsource that. It's never going to be something they can control entirely by themselves. So they've got to choose good partners. And it all comes down to procurement right from the outset, procuring a scalable system where you've chosen the right charger, you've put it in the right place. Let's just assume that's a given. But then what about the future drivers' needs? We're satisfying at the moment a lot of private driving. What about the commercial drivers? What about those who can't charge at home? What about those who need to put their vehicle in a car park overnight for commercial charging? What about the price gap between someone that's privileged to be able to park on their driveway and charge at home versus running a business out and about? These are local authority issues all of a sudden. And that's why I absolutely love this webinar. It's my favorite one of the year. If it wasn't for local authorities, our UK-based infrastructure would absolutely not be where it is today, because they were brave and they took a punt at closing that gap between private and public sector. Payment is the end of the chain. And that's where we are now. We've got legacy kit that might need to be replaced because a lot of the new payment methods don't work on those old charges. I'm all about inclusivity and accessibility. So every driver everywhere should be able to access every single charger by one method or another. So I'm really hoping we can get to the bottom of that in terms of appetite, from Senex's overview right through to Lloyd, who's on the ground doing it now in the west of England, through to a real life use case through Paul and Mike at Iveco. So looking forward to today. Are we on time? 12:15? Not bad.
Yeah, we better move on, actually. But in summary, I've picked out collaboration, support all the businesses and stakeholders in the ecosystem for a seamless experience, address the challenges around power and land, and lots of stuff that John said that was fantastic about experience. And finally, Sam, that he does in fact love lamppost charging, and Paul wants more petrol forecourt-like solutions. The latter not being necessarily
No, I
true.
don't.
That's the opposite of what he
No, I
wants.
don't.
Yeah.
I don't
I'm winding you
want
up, Paul.
He
I'm
is
winding you up.
indeed.
Don't prompt him, Johnny. You'll never shut up again.
Anyways, moving swiftly on. It's that time already, Sam, where we welcome our first guest, Sam. So if you'd like to do the honours.
Yeah, who could that be, I wonder? Right, Chris, if you're there, please do put your camera on. I can't see you. Yes,
Hello.
there you are. Right, Chris Rimmer. Chris is head of Senex Policy Strategy and Implementation Department. Alongside teams of experts working on mobility and fleet projects, he oversees the infrastructure team. This team supports communities, charities, companies, countries, and councils with their EV infrastructure-related work. This has included being the lead technical advisor to all local authorities within England's levy scheme, which means that you are the most pertinent person to be on our webinar. Fun fact, although I'm not sure this is actually a fact, because it starts with he may be related to the character Ace Rimmer with the popular 1990s sci-fi comedy Red Dwarf. But because you said you might be related, I'm not convinced that's an acceptable fun fact, Chris. But nevertheless, interesting still. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'll see if I can deliver some other fun facts. My uncle lived down the corridor from the creators, and he was a Rimmer. So there's a definite suspicion that my uncle was who it was based on, and therefore I may or may not be related. So yeah.
Good stuff. So welcome. What do you have to share with us in regards to your thoughts on this very important topic that Sarah adores?
Wow, yeah, what an introduction, Sarah. I feel like no pressure whatsoever. I mean, the work of local authorities is absolutely vital, isn't it? As has been acknowledged, they're a huge landowner, and so inevitably, just to get anything done, you end up on highways or on car parks owned by local authorities. Equally, they also are trying to safeguard the interests of their residents and businesses. And I know a lot of local authority folks are really interested in that question of equity, as was mentioned earlier. So making sure that those with residents with and without off-street parking get access to the charging they need. I love that phrase, right charge point, the right power in the right place at the right tariff, accessible with the right payment stuff, Sarah, too. So yeah, it's a really kind of critical spider in the middle of the web type stakeholder. And we get the privilege of working with lots of local authority officers, and they work hard and they get lots of requests from their councillors. They get angry phone calls from their residents. They have to deal with people trailing wires all over the place and somehow navigate their way through it. So a lot of credit to them, and it's a privilege to work with them. I think, yeah, we mentioned that the Levi Fund. This is obviously the sort of flagship fund in England, but as John will know, you've got EVIF in Scotland, the EV Infrastructure Fund, and the ULEF programme in Wales. So there's movement happening for all local authorities across the country, and be happy to share a little bit more about sort of what's going on in some of those if that's of interest and useful.
Thank you. We just had Cenex as well, of course, the Cenex Expo. And what I love about that event is you guys always have a huge breadth of presentations. And some was really focused on the on-street fund. I just wonder if we can go a little bit into where we are with I call it the Levi Fund. Am I getting that wrong? The Levy Fund. Where are we now with it? Are we seeing projects rolling out? Has the money been awarded? I've lost track.
Yeah, it's definitely Levi. So if you like
Levi.
jeans, that's where we're at.
Good, I'm glad.
But I'm sure it goes by all sorts of names, depending on how you feel about it. So yeah, I think someone mentioned in the chat, it's about £400 million has been allocated to each local authority. So the really interesting change from the on-street residential charging scheme in England and Wales, the Orcs Fund, is that this isn't one that the local authorities compete over. They already have an allocation of money. And if they hit the right quality of application, then that money is dispersed to them. There are two sort of tranches, we call them. So there's a group of local authorities who applied last financial year and a group who applied this financial year. Most of those from last financial year have already received most of the money, and they're going through a kind of action plan and some checks just before they get out to procurement, which again was mentioned earlier as a really critical part of this, because the purpose of the Levi Fund in England is to drive scale, to improve commerciality, and of course to deliver a good proportion of low power close to home charging. So that second group are now just working their way through their applications, and folks at our end, also with Energy Saving Trust and PA Consulting, are looking at it with a view to starting to get money going out as things get approved. And of course, out the end of the process, actually, we're getting procurements and tenders coming to market. I think there are 3 out there at the moment, and we're seeing more coming in the next 6, 9, 12 months. So we're sort of moving. It's taken a while. Yeah, we're trying to shift a lot of money from central government out to local government, but it is moving, and it's going to start sort of hitting the ground pretty soon, maybe even first charges in as early as next year.
That's so cool. John's
Chris,
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. The graphic behind you says 10 years of accelerating the shift to a low carbon economy. In those 10 years, what's the biggest move forward that Cenex have helped to deliver, in your opinion? Has there been one thing that stands out in your mind as your calling card, your party trick, the thing that you've done that shifted the needle?
Oh, that is a question, particularly when you got a graphic like this. I was just looking at it because I was like, I could have a dirty wall or I could have a nice graphic. Next year is our 20th anniversary, so I'm like 9 years out of date with all these stuff. I mean, it's really hard to put my finger on one thing, so I might cheat and try for 2. I think the thing that I love about working here is I'm working with genuine experts who would just absolutely blow me away day to day with their insight and their commitment to innovation. And so trying to see technical, commercial, customer, market innovation that is just pushing this ahead. And of course, actually, being a kind of research and consultancy organization, we get involved in all sorts of things and have a ringside seat and then start to connect. So to come to my second part, Cenex Expo, which was just mentioned, it ran its 17th year this year. It's kind of a stable part of the annual calendar where we see those connections. We start to reflect year on year how things are moving along. Maybe it's a cop-out answer, but kind of getting that ringside seat, connecting people, trying to push on innovation. It's a great team that we have, and it's a real privilege to be able to work here. Could I name one thing? Maybe that's a project for year 20. What's the one thing in 20 years that Cenex has done? So perhaps I'll come back next year and let you know.
Good man. Thank you.
John, we have a couple of questions from the audience, mainly Stuart and our good friend Nick. Maybe we could just do a quick fire round of questions to you, Chris.
Yeah,
I think you're best
absolutely
suited to answer them.
So Stuart Humphrey asks, would destination charging for commercial vehicles be viable for unloading and unloading whilst vehicles are idle, assuming large warehouses could install MCS chargers?
Ooh. Yes. Charge where, I mean, here's the thing, is it with electric, anywhere where you park, where you're near electricity, you can get a charge. Love this sort of grazing thing. There's a good bit of guzzling. Go to your petrol stations, John and Paul, right? But your petrol stations, but actually,
guzzling and grazing.
Yeah, wherever you park up, go and get that charge up. Of course, MCS, so that's the megawatt charging system, isn't it? Is about really serious charging for big vehicles. But I think the same principle applies if you have a little white van that's popping around, or I've seen this chat about housing associations going on in the chat. their sort of vehicles going from A to B, if they could pick up a bit of charge here, there, and everywhere, it reduces the what they need to do at a depot, or reduces the amount of time they need to queue for a public charge point. But I'm sure others in the cafe have a view on this too.
Yeah,
Well,
John, if I could just add, I mean, there's a number of different hauliers about to walk through the door right next to me, some of the largest in the world and in the UK, that are doing exactly what was phrased in that question. That is to say, we're putting infrastructure into depots that will then be shared amongst other people, perhaps maybe in a closed environment, in as much as a group that is all sharing, because there are security issues and safety issues around. You can't just make those sites open to everybody, because there are restrictions, but it doesn't stop the principle and very much the intention to collaborate in those spaces in order to ensure that more people can access that sort of charging infrastructure.
I think what's also interesting is I came up against some challenge this week where I suggested very much this system to somebody, and they said, "Oh yeah, but what about health and safety? When you've got megawatt charging close to a vehicle which is parked next to a building or potentially inside a building, we've got all manner of health and safety issues. It just can't happen." And there are organisations trying to wrestle with this at the moment to find ways that perhaps we can move megawatt chargers from storage inside to far enough outside a depot. It's a minefield for some.
Yeah, I don't think we need to worry too much
think-
about the level of power, right? The real safety provisions galore. I think
Yeah.
it's more a case of the physicality of the vehicles and the types of trucks and movement, and with human traffic and other. That's the greater concern, is the safety around that. I don't think we need to put megawatt chargers 500 meters away from a building. That's not necessary.
No. Paul, you're desperately trying to say something, mate.
Just the sharing, the charger sharing is already beginning to happen, and there is software that is out there to support that health and safety process to take companies through what would be site-specific regulations. So what we're seeing, to Sam's point, is this thing growing up, and it is already beginning. And I think it is one of the things that really could be accelerated and absolutely make a difference in local authorities, to local authorities, and also to the wider commercial vehicle sector, because I think that's where it benefits most, because there's likely to be an A to B kind of element of that, leaving site A and arriving at site B, albeit not your customer, not your own site, but a customer site, and then you can charge. So it makes a lot of sense to join up the dots, because then you're charging when you're stopped, to Sam's favorite phrase.
Thank you, Paul.
Way around.
I'm glad you mentioned about private network sharing, because it is something quite close to my heart. At Navuna, we are building tools and software to support our fleets to enable them to share their network with other fleets. So, but thank you, Chris. We need to say goodbye for now, unfortunately, and welcome our next guest speaker. But please do come back on for the final 15 minutes for another Q&A round, especially to address Nick Hewland's very good questions regarding the levy funding and complexities of public charging. But for now, we must say goodbye. So, as always, we're behind the
Cheers, Chris.
behind time.
Thanks, Chris.
Right,
this
over
could be
to
risky. Is Lloyd back?
Yes, I was about to say we had some sound issues with Mr. Lloyd
We
Allen.
did.
So before I introduce him, it's probably wise to whether you're there or not.
Well,
Lloyd?
I can always cover off a fair bit about it, which would be my absolute honour. So let's just see if he's there.
Tumbleweed moment.
Suggest
We can always go to Mike. and
Well,
then come
that's
back
not
to
a
Nick.
bad shout.
Yeah, should we do that? Sam, is that okay? Paul, are you
Fine.
ready with Mike?
I was born ready.
And Mike is ready also.
Brilliant stuff.
All right then. So we'll hopefully try and get Lloyd back. But in the meantime, Mr. Cutts, who is a no stranger to this show, of course. So Mike Cutts is the business line director for UK and Ireland for Iveco, managing the daily product. He is responsible for managing the business line to deliver the company objectives to market share, invoiced units, product specification, sales and marketing activity in the UK and the Republic of Ireland. Fun fact. I don't know whether he did or whether they did. Mike, you'll have to tell me whether you or the business set a Guinness World Record for the E-Daily towing 153.58 tons. Now, very well done anyway for having a Guinness World Record. It's not two like me, but nevertheless, it's a good effort.
You've only got one left.
It's
Still got it. Still got it.
Paul, honestly, I
Had it.
apologize to the audience
Past tense.
that Paul has an interrupting itis that he cannot seem to stop doing. But anyway, Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you as always. And you are beautifully displayed with your trucks, sorry, your vans in the background. So please do tell us what you're doing and why you're there.
So I do feel like I'm commentating on a horse race or something with this microphone, but anyway. So we're in Millbrook here this week to launch Model Year 24 daily products in the UK. So we're having a number of live sessions with dealers, bodybuilders and customers this week to show them the new products and all the new enhancements made to the new model. One demo that we are doing is to demonstrate the new GSR equipment that's now standard on products that's available. So if we flip it around the other way, we can hopefully show a live demo of what that looks like with the van traveling towards the fake car, showing the new radar systems with automatic braking. On top of that, we have blind side warning and blind spot indication systems, which help awareness of pedestrian safety, which is all standard on new Model Year 24 products, including the e-daily range as well. But we've got a variety of products with us that we can maybe have a walk around and a chat about, Paul. So if we maybe head over to our mobile power station.
Oh dear.
So what Mike's saying is that this is a mobile power station where you can hook up.
We lost sound.
Keep going, John. You've got it.
Yeah, so this is where. Yes, we got you, Mike.
You got me back. Cool. So yes, this is our mobile power station van. So with Model Year 24 e-daily, customers can have up to 50 kilowatts of onboard power, both mechanically or electrically, which gives operators a wide choice of different applications that they can run their vehicles off, using the traction batteries as the power source for lots of different equipment that's available. So thinking about different missions for the public sector, waste disposal with regards to waste compactors is a great example of we can run power off the vehicle, turn it into a rotational pump that can drive compressors that can compact waste on a waste collection vehicle, for example. Also powering things like tail lifts and more low voltage equipment as well. So onboard power is class leading on e-daily products. Walk around. So here we've got a drop side e-daily with a tow bar fitted. One of the key things about our product is that 3.5 ton towing is standard on e-daily. So that's class leading and really gives operators the opportunity to transition their fleet from diesel to electric, because 3.5 ton towing is standard across our full range now. And we know that if operators are going to be towing things like generators or lawn cutting equipment, by the time you've got that on a trailer, you're looking at least 2.5 tons. So 3.5 tons is plenty for those applications. And then finally, moving to our cage tipper. Daily has always been a great versatile vehicle for body conversions, and the e-daily is just the same. So the bodybuilder mounting points on our product are in exactly the same place as our diesel product, which means it's really easy to transition the body configuration from one vehicle to the other. And with our new Model Year 24 daily, we now have a 5.1 meter wheelbase available with 4 batteries, which gives you a fantastic opportunity to put some of the larger conversions on these products as well. So maybe for the municipal business thinking about grounds maintenance, where you've got maybe a beaver tail driving lawn cutting equipment onto the back of those vehicles. They need to carry a lot of payload and need a lot of load length as well. The new 7-ton e-daily could just be fit for that purpose. So we've got a huge versatility when it comes to our product range, and for the public sector especially, where we have vehicles that are available in twin rear-wheel drive, which is suitable for kind of more off-road and park maintenance type missions. I'm sure there's a vehicle there for every council.
Great job.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions in the inbox?
Oh,
There's plenty. I think
loads.
tons.
I just
Yeah.
want to say thank you so much for that, Mike. That's really helpful. And I would have loved to have been there actually, just to see Paul Kirby behind the camera and not actually in front of the camera.
Yeah,
I'm sort of next to it.
I was about to say, Johnny, I don't think I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Paul's better in front of the camera than he is holding it.
Well,
Do you know-
there's a compliment in there somewhere.
Do you know, I shared the link actually, Mike, to the range online. I think it's safe to say that living where I do, which is really rurally, with very small, narrow lanes to service all the local authorities, those smaller vehicles are used all the time. So they have lots of smaller vehicles going around rather than gigantic refuse collection ones. And those cage tippers are the most prominent for food waste collection, for garden waste collection. So yeah, it's really nice to see them there, but also out in the wild, as I like to say. So I'll share that link again, just because it got a bit buried in the chat. But please do have a look at
Thank
what's
you very
available.
much.
Brilliant. I think I'd like to invite Chris back on to the webinar, and then we can go through some of these questions that we've got in the mailroom.
What about, am I not to cover off some of Lloyd Allen's City Leap project findings? I'm more than happy to do that. He doesn't appear to
Lloyd
have come
can't
back.
join.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
please.
I'll do my very best with it. As you know, I did leave the project way back in 2018, but I stay in touch regularly, and what they're doing is a huge pride piece to see it in the area that I'm from, which is the West of England Combined Authority. So that's Bath and North East Somerset, North Somerset Council, and also Bristol Council, and I've missed one, South Gloucestershire Council. So Bristol City Leap is actually a 20-year partnership. It's where we've had a huge injection of funding between Bristol City Council, Amoresco and Vattenfall. So you may have heard of those as being huge global brands who are kind of putting their money where their mouth is. So it's a whole holistic project. It's not just about EV charging. It's about thinking about social housing, how best to bring clean and affordable energy, so that there is going to be an installation of a network of EV charging. And of course, they had their £7.2 million project through, I think that was sort of started 2015 onwards. So it's about renewable energy, social housing, schools and council buildings. So this kind of gets back to my point I was saying earlier. It's not just about taking everything in isolation. What they've done is seen this whole bigger picture and decided to join the dots between the different council departments to show that it all needs to be underpinned with renewable energy and access to renewable energy, and therefore access to cheaper and more affordable energy in itself, whether that's for powering your home or your vehicles. So I've done a couple of clicking links here, and one of which was quite new news this year. It's actually an incredible investment of £750 million, all about putting clean energy in Bristol. And of course, they've got their mayor, Marvin Rees, there, who backs this completely. Stakeholder engagement from the bottom to the top makes sure that these projects are put through, they are a success, they are well funded, they're well supported, and they're well communicated. And one of my favourite phrases is, strategy is only as good as your ability to communicate that strategy. And I wish Lloyd was here to take all the credit for how hard he works to get that message out to businesses, residents, and the neighbouring local authorities about how they can replicate what's being done there in the city with the residents in mind. So what I was going to ask about through Lloyd's Q&A session, so with any luck you can dial in time for that, is how many charges they're up to, because there was a time where they were the council offering the largest number of EV chargers in the whole country because of their private and public sector collaboration that they did. And I happen to know that their network is called Revive, which I believe is backed by Genie Point and Equans. They're the behind the scenes players in there. And that will be increased in its volume. And what they've done that no other private organisation would do, it wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, is put charges in the right place where people needed them, where on a commercial model that didn't add up and the private sector said no. So one of the things they did was make sure that everyone had equitable access to chargers, whether that was 22 dual port AC or in this case a 50 kilowatt Genie Point. And some of their rates are so low, I think I only paid 35 pence per kilowatt hour the other day on a charger that I used that was provided and funded. It's not subsidised, but because it's not got a fat cap profit margin, because it's a local authority scheme, they can afford to keep their costs a little lower for their residents. Doing tons of work with private sector in terms of fleet depots close to your heart, Johnny, I know. So this is where Bristol City Leap has got so ingrained in how the city functions, how the city is designed, how the city's vehicles move around, and how people's residents can benefit from this project. So it was some European funding, some private sector funding, and lots of learning from other countries around the world. And Chris, if you're coming back on for Q&A, I suspect in your work at Cenex, you will have crossed paths with this project, because it is a really sort of global leader on how to close that public and private sector gap. Of course, I couldn't do that as much justice as Lloyd would have, but I will get in touch with him and try to bring some of those headlines about numbers of charges and the number of investment.
I don't know what I've been more impressed with, the fact that what Bristol are doing, or the fact that you've been able to articulate all of that information off the cuff is quite extraordinary.
I love it. I love my brain. I just take it all in, because I love what they're doing. I love Cenex. I love all of the representation, and the comments have been so heartening in the chat. If you haven't got time, just scroll through them. But that whole stereotype of local authority workers being lazy or chipping off early or being an absolute myriad of red tape is just so unfounded. My experience from 2004 to 2018 showed me that people are doing more than one job. They're paid half of what the private sector seems to get paid, and they've got a whole other set of pressures. This is our bread and butter, but it's a tiny part of their world. So huge clap for anybody who's devoted their world and work to local authority. Hats off.
And you know, Sarah, really interestingly, through the Levi Fund, we always talk about the capital stuff. But actually, there's this capability fund where central government has paid for new officer resource. There's 240 new LA officers working up and down the country, precisely because of the Levi Fund. So I think, you know, Lloyd is a great manifestation of that, isn't it? In terms of he was at Bristol and now he's at Bristol City Lead. And more Lloyds is what we're looking for.
We just need more Lloyds. The Lego movie knew that.
The Lloyds.
The Lloyd.
So, guys, I have a quick question to my counterpart here, live at Millbrook, because I know, Mike, you've been inviting a lot of people from across the country, and I'm imagining that you've got quite a good relationship with the public sector. Talk to us about what they are saying to you through events like this, and with testing the dailies and the e-dailies in particular. What feedback are you getting live from them?
Yeah, I mean, public sector has always been one of our key markets. The durability and flexibility of our product has always worked really well with that kind of municipal mission. And the transition, obviously, we're seeing a higher and higher percentage of council tenders come out now through the TPPL and CCS frameworks, where a percentage of them need to purchase a certain amount of EV product within it. But what they're looking to do is to transition across without a compromise. And what we're able to provide is exactly that. So, you know, they want vehicles that can tow. They want vehicles with onboard power to do a specific mission. They want to effectively just replicate what they're doing on the diesel fleet with electric. And we're able to offer that, which is great. But one of the things that one of the challenges you've got, I mean, the mission's perfect. You know, the vehicles are going back to base. They're charging overnight, which is great. But obviously, a lot of council locations struggle to have the power to be able to charge the vehicles at the right speeds. One of the things we're finding is that because we can offer 22 kilowatt AC, then municipals are able to charge some of the bigger battery models still without the need to rely on the heavily high investment on DC infrastructure. And so having that higher rate of AC charging is giving them more options. And that's a real key benefit that we're finding is working really well, not just about acquiring the vehicle, but how can it work within their depots as well.
And Chris, in Cenex, are you getting that same feedback from councils? Are they telling you that maybe the 22 kilowatt is a good solution to kind of meet the need for the light commercial vehicle sector, obviously not the heavy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the capabilities just described there are perfect. We're helping to run a waste program in Wales where they're looking to slowly replace waste tippers, recycling vehicles, refuse vehicles. But the same applies here, where you need the power to get the vehicles up to spec and ready for the operations. So it's just there, ready to go when the folks go out. And so, yeah, getting the right kind of spec on the vehicles, matching that well with the chargers, sorting out the power question that you raised earlier. All of those pieces of the puzzle need to come together. So it's really great to see what's being launched and showcased today.
Sounds like you guys need to get together, Chris.
Come to Millbrook.
Well, yeah, we did that a few weeks ago, but yeah.
I mean, the other thing I wanted to mention as well, it's not electric related, but it's CNG related as well. So, you know, we've seen a lot in the press recently about councils needing to recycle their own food waste. And a lot of councils are trying to work out the best way that they're going to manage that waste when it's collected. But that's a perfect opportunity to put a digester, an anaerobic digester in there, and ultimately you're then creating gas that you could either sell back to the network, or why not have a range of CNG dailies?
And tell us, because I mean, people might be forgiven for thinking, well, that's just creating another sort of emissions problem. But talk to us about the reduction that you can expect from a CNG powered vehicle.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at it well to wheel with regards to using the biomass created from food waste, you're looking at a 95% reduction in CO2 versus diesel. So it's not quite 100% like electric, but actually it's a really good viable alternative.
It's a stepping stone kind of.
Exactly. And, you've got a CNG vehicle operates at a less noisy decibel rate than diesel, which means for urban collection mission, especially in the early hours of the morning, which when a lot of this stuff happens is perfect. But yeah, ultimately it's another option within the toolkit for the municipal to consider, well, look, I'm going to have all this waste collected anyway. What am I going to do with the byproduct, which is the gas? Why not use it to fuel your fleet and get a carbon saving at the same time? So, CNG is another great option in that kind of decarbonisation of the fleet.
Yeah. Good news. What other questions have we got, guys?
Oh, we got
so many.
I've got one. So, Mike, I drove the E-Daily 250 miles last week.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've driven a van of that size. How on earth have you made that so easy to take around? Because as a driver, I mean, I've driven pretty much everything, Lamborghini Aventadors right through to little Twizzies, but that it just feels like a car. It's amazing. If you forget the length of the long wheelbase, it's brilliant. How have you done that? Do you work with driver panels?
Oh, the length is really important.
Yeah,
he's such a clever guy.
Engineered it all at home. I mean, there's a few key features that kind of set the daily apart from everybody else. Firstly, it's class-leading turning circle. So it's got a tighter turning circle than any other LCV in its class. So, when you are in tight urban spaces, even in a long wheelbase product, it means those 3-point turns are a little bit easier. Also, we've got city steering assist. So it's additional power steering capability, which means that if you are carrying a heavy load, it's not going to transfer through onto the steering wheel. So it'll still be really light touch. And then with the new model year 24 daily, we have a full digital cluster, Apple Android CarPlay, 2 USB chargers for mobile phone for both driver and passenger. Memory foam seats inspired by NASA, so that people that have long journeys every day will be sat in a comfortable seat. They can even spec pneumatic air seats on top of that as well. So,
which is what I had. So I got into the cab and the seat bounces like a proper trucker.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the Daily is probably a comfier place to sit in my car. They've come on so far as vehicles, and people spend a lot of time in these places, so they need to be suitable for the driver. And the new Daily is a really comfortable, nice place to be.
It's
I think
outstanding.
We might have to move on to trucks because they're getting too car-like, these men.
Bit too comfortable for you. Oh, what else have we got in the Q&A?
So there is a brilliant question from Nick Hulin. So,
Yes.
Given that the Levi tender aims to provide residents without driveways with a transformative large-scale public charging network, how does a local authority properly assess a bidding charge point operator's experience in delivering and reliably operating large-scale networks? So how do you know that CPOs are any good?
Well, yeah, that's actually really mirrored the question I was going to ask. Perhaps I can give it a stab with my Lloyd hat on. Lloyd and I were part of a large team that had to do a procurement exercise spanning the next 15 years of service provision from the councils. And you can it's rubbish in, rubbish out, right? They write something on their application and then we read it and assess it, and they say they're amazing and they say they can guarantee X amount of uptime, they can guarantee. But I've always called for, having left that service, a much more forensic analysis of those procurement questions and answers. So we should be asking things like, right, so when the charger goes down, where is your network support service based? How many warehouses do you have in the UK stocked with the precise parts that we're going to need to replace with, rather than having to shove a bag over a charger and send a terrible message out there? I know Bristol City Leapers funded, I think, is 150 on-street charges, be that through lampposts or pavements. So, Nick, they're going to have the exact same situation that you run into with your business. Chris, you'll have an overview on it. I've only got one lens. Tell us what you think.
I think it's a cracking question. The simple answer is you can't, because who has delivered and reliably operated a large-scale network? We are breaking new ground here, folks, and that makes it very difficult. And I'm always reaching for other industries. I'm like, is it broadband? Well, no, actually, because that's a whole different kind of ball game. Is it about the switch off from, kind of analog to digital radio? No, because you don't need a radio in life, but many people do rely on cars. So it comes down to a kind of risk management approach, which sounds really dull for a Thursday lunchtime, doesn't it? But actually,
Wednesday lunchtime.
Wednesday. I'm ahead of myself. It's so dull. I even think it's tomorrow. So I think, really what we want to do is you've got kind of involvement of commercial folks at the local authorities who we need to equip and we need to train so they understand the ins and outs of particularly EV charging. And then you're looking at kind of really quite dry stuff like supplier qualification. So looking at their balance sheet, understanding their experience, starting to see, are they just like me in my shed, or is it a much more robust organization, as indeed the one that Nick works for? And then you're looking to put in place sensible KPIs and the kind of contractual guidelines that say, look, things aren't going to be perfect. We all know that. When they go wrong, as Sarah says, what is it that we're going to do about it so that we can make sure we not just get it in the right place, but it's actually there and working and at the right price and all that sort of
and prove it. And that's SLA, the service level agreement, is so critical in this discussion, because whilst all good intentions were declared, what are you going to do and how long will it take you? And that's what I was saying with the whole, where is your supply chain base? Because that's something that I hear time and time again. We can't get the parts, we can't get the people, and we can't get the parts. Well, did you not know that when you signed up for it? It's terrifying.
AC, we have a good audience. Is there a chance that we could put a Kahoot survey up?
Oh, it's got about the Kahoot.
We cheeky could. Okay, right. Now then, keep chatting because it takes a minute. It's a bit clunky, but we'll get there in just 1 second.
Get your smartphones out. I can't do it because I'm using my phone to dial in.
John, you said keep chatting.
Go for it. Keep chatting.
So there's a good comment in the chat from Rebecca Hume, whom I presume I pronounced that right, from Trailer. And the reason I'm picking up on it is because Mike has got experience of working with Trailer in terms of helping van users to get more out of their electric vans in particular. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, Trailer are one of our approved bodybuilders on our program, and we work with them on a number of daily innovations where we integrate their solar system onto the roof of some of our commercial vehicles. Typically, it's Lutons, but also cage tippers as well. Anywhere where you've got free roof space, it doesn't actually need to take up a huge amount of the roof space itself, but what that will do is supply enough power to effectively feed the 12-volt battery, which is then used to either power the equipment inside the cabin, or if you've got equipment, say for example a tail lift, if you're on a multi-drop mission, that's enough to power the tail lift all day long. When you kind of convert that into range extension, it probably means that typically during the summer months, you'll probably get around about an extra 25 miles of range on a 3.5 to 4.25 ton Luton vehicle with a multi-drop tail lift mission, purely because of the extra energy that's putting it in. It's not draining the 12-volt battery, which is ultimately then draining the traction batteries. So it's helping kind of top it up. It's not enough to power the whole vehicle, but if it can power the auxiliary equipment, then that's reserving your traction battery range for the actual vehicle itself.
Yeah, so helping vans achieve their original mission without actually having to give up the range that they would perhaps do in a petrol or diesel scenario. Anyway, I know that we've got you're cracking on with your what's a doobie, and I'm all okay. I've not done a thing.
John,
my hands have been here.
John, you need the window to be a little bit larger. It's only
right.
Bake it.
Okay, let me give it a big window. How's that?
There you go.
Love it.
Right. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds. Lovely to see Paula Kirby in the house. Right. Right, here we go. So
Okay.
Here is your question. It's all to do with Bristol and the City Leap. And this is a word cloud question, I seem to recall. Oh, no, it's a quiz. It's a quiz. So Bristol City Leap is a partnership between Bristol City Council and Amadisco, Amoresco, Amacongo, or Americano.
Oh,
Now,
I'd like an Americano.
Sarah did mention the answer to this question, so put in your votes quick as you like. No hanging about. You've got 45 seconds in total.
You could even Google it in that
Paul
time.
Kirby doesn't know.
It's got to be this one.
It does,
But you've got to pay attention to these presenters when they're on because they give you the answers. I think an Amadisco is a good idea.
I want an Americano. That's what I want.
I would like that. Okay,
Right,
5 seconds.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, well done.
Now then, nobody went for the Americano, funnily enough.
Amadisco. Who did
I'm going for one now.
So there we are. So that was that. Right. Do we want to do more of this? I have more lined up. Or
I
do you
like
want
them,
to
but they take so long.
Yeah, should we go back to questions?
Thanks, good idea, John.
Right, okay. Let me just find my little window. There we are. So, questions to the panelists. Do the devolved authorities provide more opportunities and less resistance for clean technology compared to Whitehall? Great question, Stuart. Chris Rimmer, what's your perspective on this? Do you think the devolved authorities are quicker to move than London-based and the England model?
Oh, that's a slightly loaded question, isn't it? I
Indeed.
think I think the folks in Scotland and Wales do a great job. You know, there's considerably fewer vehicles over there in the first place. The budgets are smaller, the teams are smaller, and actually what you see by what, say, Transport for Wales and the Welsh Government are doing around delivering and supporting rapid charging, now starting to look at that near home question, how to do that when your lampposts are wooden in some places. You can't strap a charger to a wooden lamppost and your roads are narrow, really difficult. Obviously, John, you mentioned Scotland earlier. Great work with the Charge Place Scotland now moving onto more of a commercial footing. So I think devolution in that sense is working, though it would be nice to see a bit of joined upness sometimes. So actually, you know, all in favour of devolution, but whatever. London-based, the folks at OZEV do a pretty decent job. And then you get into the mayors and the combined authorities, which is a question too. It allows for a bit of local decision making because what is relevant in Loughborough, where I am, is very different to Leicestershire, is very different to London and any other places you can think of beginning with L. So I think it does help to push it down and out and to really meet residents and businesses with what they need, where they need it.
Quite right. Cheers, Chris. Now then, Mike Cutts, stand by. We got a question from Mark Main, and he says, how many lifts can the Iveco tipper handle in a typical day?
A typical day? How
what kind of real world performance stats can you share regarding its usage?
Well, it depends on a customer mission, doesn't it? I mean, you can tip as many times as you want, but obviously it's going to have an impact on the range of the e-daily if you're going to do so. Difficult question to answer. I mean,
I would say it's difficult because every operation is difficult and it depends on the amount of weight in the back. It depends how far you're traveling.
Fun fact for you though. So what the e-daily does do is through artificial intelligence is learn the daily routine of the operator, will take into account the amount of typical tips that the vehicle will make in a day and adapt the range for the driver to take into account that consumption of the power of that onboard equipment.
Clever. That's proper, because we were often going on about the WLTP and how the numbers on the front that don't stack up. I mean, this is a great day. You're having good information. This is awesome.
Love
That's
that
what
van.
we do.
Now then, Richard Tyler asks Sarah a question. Sarah, wakey. From your experience working with the West of England Combined Authority, what are the benefits and or challenges for local authorities procuring through a combined authority?
You always have a lead, so there's always going to be a lead person assigned, which is a really, really good team effort, right? And it comes back to what Chris and I were saying about having that adequate training. So the person who's the lead is going to be the one who understands that legal language a bit better, who understands the product a little better. And what immediately sprung to mind there with advantages and disadvantages is the procurement rules are really tight, really, really strict. You can't be seen to be fraternizing with the potential supply chain, which is kind of the wrong way round, because I wanted to know what it was that I might be able to go shopping for, if you see what I mean. So actually really great portals exist, like Crown Commercial Services, really flexible with advisors on hand to kind of delve into the bits that you might not understand. But one of the really good things about the devolved power is you can recruit external support. So you can get a legal team that isn't just an in-house legal team to walk you through those conditions. So you're not in touch with the end supplier if you then choose that end supplier. Even things like attending the EV Cafe can be a little bit difficult, because of course you're here to learn about different people's presentations, and then if they're there seen later to become a successful partner, how did that conversation happen? So you have to be really careful, and that's one of the things that's difficult in Lloyd's position and others, is knowing what you can and can't do, how flexible you can be within those rules, how do you get the knowledge you need to make the right procurement decision, and critically, how do you structure that relationship going forward so it operates very much like a private business.
Yeah, now we got very quick couple of things. Robin Hughes from Hong Kong asks if Ian Thompson is related to Daley Thompson. And Ian Thompson asks a question. He says, how difficult would it be for a multi-storey car park operator to install chargers? I've seen some that needed increased space taken from other bays, or even the already narrow roadways. Anybody got any experience of that? Chris, are you in that sort of ballpark?
Yeah, in that car park, I suspect. So yeah, done a lot of. I'm like, just bring the puns. Typical daily operations was brilliant from Mike. I thought it was phenomenal. I think so. Yeah, clearly in a multi-story car park, you're in a more enclosed environment. So you've got to talk to your insurers about how happy they are. You've got to think height as well as width and length. If you can place charge points at the end of bays, that's obviously super helpful. Put some impact protection in, but make sure it's step free. Clearly that can become quite difficult then, where you see these, we drive around these things, don't we? And it's like an absolute squeeze to get in. So I think it is more complex. It's about finding the right place. We find a lot of multi-story car park operators stick them on the roof because people generally don't like driving, 5 floors up to the roof. And so there's a little bit more space to play with, and you're not going to be taking out parking spaces. So that's kind of what we see. But go for it. We need them in car parks and bull parks and
We do.
van parks and whatever
Grid.
else.
Don't forget the grid either.
Definitely some in the
Definitely
some in Bedfordshire car parks.
Something so important that we didn't cover was the mug. Who wins the mug? I vote Martin for suggesting that we need to do a Jackass video.
Well,
unshapeable.
Yeah. No, you don't want to do Jackass. Okay. Sorry, you don't get the mug.
do you know what? I think there's been brilliant. Go on, Paul.
I'm just going to wish Robin Hughes to get well soon, because I know he wasn't well, and it meant he couldn't make the trip last week. So Robin Hughes, get well soon. I hope you're feeling better.
Should we send a mug to Robin Hughes in Hong Kong?
Yes.
Let's do that.
I think we should.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you again to our special guests, to the EV Cafe team, and a big shout out to our sponsors, Webfleet, Zaptec, the AA Europcar, and of course, Iveco, for making today possible. And as always, if you want to stay connected, then best to follow us on our social channels for more updates: LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, those kind of things. And the news this Friday at 10 a.m. is our next live event. Until next time, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Johnny. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.